Hi, everyone. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas. And I'm really excited tonight to be joined by Fiona Davis. We have been big fans of hers for a long time. As a matter of fact, I wrote one of my very infrequent, frankly, fan letters to her when her first book came out, and The Dollhouse, and said, hey, if you're ever in town, we'd love to host you for this. And fortunately, she has somewhat local connections. So she's been coming to the store for every book when able. Obviously, we're doing these virtually right now for everyone's safety, but it's going to be lovely to talk with her tonight about the Magnolia Palace set at the Frick, which is one of my favorite museums. So it's just like all the best things rolled into one. Many of you might have already gotten your books, or your books are on the way. We did a personalized book campaign. We still have signed copies available of the Magnolia Palace, but if you did order a personalized copy, all of them went out. Bunches of carts full of books went out yesterday, so that should be on the way to you. And if you have questions, don't be shy. We're going to chat for about 30 minutes, and then we'll get to those. And for those of you who haven't ordered the book yet, or you want to hear more about or read more about Fiona and her books, there's a link in the comments. So like I said, don't be shy for the questions. And now I will bring on Fiona to get to it. Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. It is so nice to see you, even if it's virtual.
Likewise, I've been looking forward to this, as I look forward to your books, and you always have such great little tidbits too. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. Let me do your formal bio really quickly, and then we'll get started. Fiona Davis is the New York Times bestselling author of several novels, including The Dollhouse, The Address, The Masterpiece, The Chelsea Girls, The Lions of Fifth Avenue, and now The Magnolia Palace. She lives in New York City and is a graduate of the College of William and Mary in Virginia and the Columbia Journalism School. Easy for me to say. Okay, so you always do this wonderful thing with architecture being the theme of your book, and as I already said, the Frick is the place du jour. Why don't you tell us a little bit just about the Magnolia Palace?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start by saying this is not my usual background. I am on book tour in South Carolina near the ocean, hence the fish motif, which is quite something. And so thank you for bearing with me as I do it from a hotel room, which is not. I usually have bookcases behind me like you do, McKenna, which is very professional.
I try. We've only done hundreds of these, so I had to get my act together.
Exactly, the pressure. So this is the book, The Magnolia Palace, and it just came out Tuesday. And yeah, this book is set at the Frick collection. And I've always loved setting books in landmark buildings. I think it comes from being a kid and going to England with my parents, who are both English, and seeing really old castles and ruins and grand estates. And so I live in New York now, and there's just so many wonderful old buildings, and the Frick is definitely one of them. It's a museum, but it's not like the Guggenheim or the Met. You know, it's much smaller because it was a residence for the Frick family before it became a museum. And so when you walk in, it's like it's frozen in time. It's as if the Frick family went off to a dinner party and they might be back at any moment. You know, there's the same furnishings, the artwork on the walls. And Mr. Frick was a really big art collector and also an industrialist. And so the walls are filled with Turners and Renoirs and Rembrandt. There are 34 Vermeers in the world, and the Frick has 3 of them. So it's pretty unique. And if you ask any New Yorker what their favorite museum is, it tends to be the Frick. There's just something about it that's really, really special. And yeah, so my book is set at the Frick in 2 different timelines. And just a brief synopsis, in 1919, it's from the point of view of an artist model named Lillian. And she has been very successful, but gets caught up in a scandal. And she hides out by taking a job as the private secretary to Helen Frick, who was Henry's daughter, and she was in her late 20s then, and living in the Frick mansion. And she gets very caught up in the family drama, including, romantic trysts and a stolen pink diamond, which I call the Magnolia diamond. And then I love dual timelines. So the other timeline is 1966. And that's from the point of view of a fashion model named Veronica. And she is doing a Vogue photo shoot at the Frick, which is now a museum. And it goes terribly wrong. And she gets trapped inside during a 3-day blizzard, along with an intern named Joshua. And she stumbles upon a series of hidden messages that are hidden within the art on the Frick's walls. And they both kind of start off on this scavenger hunt that she and Joshua hope she hopes it might solve all of her financial problems, as well as possibly solve a murder that happened in the Frick family many, many years ago. So you can see there's a lot of moving parts in this one. It's
Yeah, they're all there. To be fair, there always are a good number of moving parts with the dual timelines. Now, you mentioned that. That's actually my next question. You do love to do that. Why do you think you're so drawn to that?
I love reading them. You know, I love books that go back and forth in time so you can compare how things have changed over time. And I love mysteries so that you have this mystery element that hopefully links up at the end, and the two of them kind of interweave and then come together in a way that's just really satisfying. To me, that's a great book. And so when I started deciding to try and write a work of historical fiction, I thought, hey, you know, I should do dual timelines. That'll be fun. And if I had known how hard it is, I would have never started. But once I started, there's a part of me that's definitely an engineer's daughter. And I like getting all those parts into place and getting the machinery to work. And it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle of words. And then, you know, by the time it's done, you feel like, okay, I pulled that off. And so I think that's why I do it. It's really, really challenging. And one of the things I did in the second timeline, just to make my life even, was I decided to keep it to a limited number of characters, a limited setting, and a limited timeline. So it's only 2 characters, that's Veronica and Joshua, over 3 days, all in the Frick mansion. And that was really fun to try to incorporate.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I have a couple kind of deep dive questions. So can you expand a little on Helen Frick? I found her fascinating, and what you found out about her.
Yeah, I love that you did. I've had so many people who've read the book say that Helen is their favorite character, and I love that because she's a really complicated woman. Helen Frick was the daughter of Henry Clay Frick, and when he died in 1919, he left her $38 million, and that made her the richest married woman in America. For lived with her mom and dad, and after a kind of family tragedy when she was very young, her mother really retreated from view, and Helen stepped up to become her father's confidant, both socially and in terms of the art collecting. And he was a tough guy, keep in mind. Like, this is a guy who was a union buster. He survived an assassination attempt, and they took the bullets out of his leg without anesthesia. Like, this was a tough man. And his daughter was equally tough. And I can only imagine the kind of fights they got into, and that I went ahead and did. And in the story, you know, you learn about her that she was very, very single-minded, let's say. A New Yorker profile from 1939 describes her as a woman of very robust prejudices. And it was things like, if her friends bobbed their hair, right, which was a very popular hairstyle in the 20s, she dropped them. She wore a pompadour and a bun, which was a very kind of Gilded Age thing most of her adult life. And on top of that, she hated Germans. Like, if she bought a farm eventually north of the city, she wouldn't let anyone with a German last name on the property. She would never have any German equipment. She created a library next door to the Frick called the Frick Reference Library, which is really a top-notch library. But at the same time, she wouldn't let anyone with a German last name entrance into the library. She was kind of really, you know, stuck in her mindset. But then on top of that, you know, she created this vacation home for working girls in Massachusetts so that people who worked in factories could go take a break. And she did that when she was quite young. And then in World War I, in 1917, she created a Red Cross unit, and she took it across the sea, which was so dangerous at that time, and helped refugees in France. And so she was just this really interesting mess of contradictions. And I knew I wanted to include her the more that I read about her.
Yeah. The other character that I would love to know more about is the character, I guess, based on Audrey Munson. Would you like to elaborate on her as well?
Yeah, sure. So When I was doing the research, I read biographies of the Fricks, which taught me so much about them. They were a family of three living in a household with a staff of 27. And then in contrast to that, if you look above the entrance to the Frick, and it's on the cover as well, you can see it. Above the doorway is this reclining nude carved in stone. And that was Audrey Munson. She was a very famous artist, model, and muse in the early 1900s. And she posed for the Frick entrance. She also posed for sculptors and her figure is all over New York City, even today. She's in front of the Plaza Hotel. She's at Columbus Circle, the Fireman's Memorial, the Titanic Memorial, the New York Public Library. She's just to the left of the entrance. She is everywhere because she was considered to be an absolute neoclassical beauty. So she had an aquiline nose and a small chin and curvy hips. And she was just lauded and heralded in her heyday. But then her life takes a turn. She gets involved in this scandal where her landlord killed his wife. And the police, when they were investigating, found a black and white ad of Audrey in a bathing suit from an ad she'd done a long time ago. And they assumed it was a love triangle and started going after her. And so she and her mother kind of fled upstate New York, and she tried to get into film. That did not go well. And eventually she tried to commit suicide by drinking mercury. And then her mother finally put her in an asylum where she died in 1996 at the age of 104. And at that time she was buried in an unmarked grave. And it was just incredible, this woman's story. And I feel like both Audrey and Helen Frick are these women who have kind of been lost to history, mainly because they were overshadowed by the men that they were with. So, Helen was overshadowed by her father, and Audrey was overshadowed by the sculptors that she worked for. And I just couldn't help wondering, what would it have been like if this free-spirited artist model met this prickly, temperamental Helen Frick? And, because they're both connected by the mansion. And there's no sign that they ever met. But I just started wondering, and a scene came to me of, there's Audrey, and in the book I call her Lillian because I do change her life. Her trajectory is not the same, so I didn't give away any spoilers. And so in my book, Lillian is standing there in the height of the scandal, and she's looking up at the front door at this figure of herself back when she was a success. And I had this this scene just came to me of the door opening and a woman coming out and saying, "Hurry up, get inside, you're late." And she realizes that she's been mistaken for an applicant for the role of private secretary for Helen Frick. And I thought, well, what if she gets the job, and is introduced to this household as a real fish out of water. And the book and the plot really came from there. And so I have so much, I really have to thank Audrey Munson for being such an inspiration. And the fact that people really don't know about her, and they really should. She's part of New York's history.
Yeah. It's like, I think there was a book that just came out recently about the woman who actually was so critical in the Morgan Library so same thing, like this incredible woman that you just don't hear about. And the library itself is now starting to have acknowledgments of her and her role. And but yeah, it's fascinating, and I thought they were great.
And that's the Personal Librarian, which is a fabulous book. And
Marie Benedict, right?
Yes, and Victoria Johnson, I believe, is they both wrote it. And what's so interesting is for this book, I interviewed a past director of the Frick, a past curator named Colin Bailey, because he'd written a book about it. And so I went off and interviewed him, and he now works at the Morgan Library. So I interviewed him in the Morgan Library. And so there's everything, all of us historical fiction authors are very intertwined, which I love.
Yep, absolutely. So we've talked about those two amazing women, but were there any other juicy little tidbits or fun tidbits that you came across researching this book that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, one of the things I did was I got this wonderful behind the scenes tour of the Frick, and the staff there were so welcoming. And so as you walk in, only the first floor is open to the public, and there's this huge entryway with a stairway and an organ tucked underneath it. And then you have the dining hall and a living room, and in the back you have this huge room that is the art gallery that Mr. Frick set up. But if you go down into the basement, that's where the kitchen would have been and the male staff would have stayed there. But on top of that, they have a 2-lane bowling alley that was built in 1914. And it's got this automatic ball return and it still works. It's
Oh, wow.
beautiful. So of course I had to set a scene there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was one surprise, which I loved. And then if you go on up, the second floor, it's the bedrooms for the guests and for the Fricks. And then you go up another floor, and that's where the maids lived. And there's these amazing rooms, like there's a fur vault that's still there and a trunk storage room, just all these things that are now, of course, it's a lot of offices and administrative things in those rooms. But you really get a great sense of what the building was like. And, and you can look out of the windows and you see this expansive lawn that leads out to Fifth Avenue with, of course, the magnolia trees growing on it. And so you really get a sense of what it was like when they were there, which is kind of fun. And yeah, I would say the biggest surprise would have been that bowling alley.
That's great. That's great. Okay. I see a lot of the questions I was going to ask people have already asked in the comments. So I'll get to those in a little bit. I'm going to skip forward I'm going to skip to another one because this one's also been asked. Okay. So what did you read in your formative years? And was there a book that made you want to be a writer?
Oh, that's interesting. I have to say, I did not plan on being a writer. I thought other people wrote books. There is no way I thought I could write a book. When I was young, I remember reading Where a Wild Fern Grows, which was so moving. And it was the first time I was really moved by a book and understood the power of words. And of course, Laura Ingalls Wilder was a huge thing growing up. But also, what happened was I did a bunch of things. I went to New York as an actress and I acted for 10 years. And then I went to Columbia Journalism School. And then I started writing nonfiction. And going to the J School really helped me learn how to shape a narrative and tell a story, how to research, how to go out and interview people. And I would say that was the one thing that made me think, oh, maybe I could be a writer, because I stumbled upon a story that I thought would be a great article. But at the time, there wasn't enough accessibility to the people who I wanted to talk about. And I just decided, well, maybe I'll write a book about it, because then I can make dialogue up, which was quite terrifying at the time. And that became my debut. The Dollhouse was that book. So it was really this kind of weird segue of doing a different job every decade, which I highly recommend. And then eventually ending up where you are. And it's so gratifying. And I've had such a good time.
That's great. Do you want to give us a hint about what you're working on now?
Sure. So there's a couple things coming out, which I'm really excited about. I started doing research into Carnegie Hall because when it was built, there were all these studios built on the top, and all these famous people passed through those doors. Martha Graham, Mark Twain, Marlon Brando. It's just incredible. But then I was asked by Amazon to do a short story as part of an anthology that historical fiction authors are doing that'll come out this summer. And I realized that was perfect for that. So that short story will be out, and I'll have more of the details later, and I'll definitely put them on my website once they are. They'll be out sometime this summer. And then I was thinking, all right, where will I set the next book? And of course, there's so many options in New York. It's kind of overwhelming. And I got this email through my website of a woman saying, I'm in my 80s, I'm a former Rockette, and if you want to know the secrets of Radio City, you should reach out. And so, of course, I did.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
She's just a delight. We've talked a number of times, and I've been interviewing lots of Rockettes who were Rockettes in the 50s and 60s, which is great. So that's when it's set. And yeah, that will be out sometime next year. And it's been so much fun to work on. Dancers are amazing to speak with, because especially the Rockettes, they remember everything. And there's just so much to play with. So we'll see how that goes.
Seriously, I can't wait. That sounds great. I think that someone's already asked this question in the comments, but I can't keep up. We have a lot of questions in the comments, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. So, were you able? I mean, you're in New York, and obviously, you've already mentioned that you have been able to visit the Frick and do the behind-the-scenes tour. How was your research, or how is your research being affected by COVID?
It's a really good question. I took that behind the scenes tour in January of 2020. And that's when, we had no idea what was coming. And normally I go back and visit a building a number of times just to, find out the details and, all right, where's that stairway? What does that look like? And I couldn't do that because the city shut down in March. And luckily the Frick has this amazing website, frick.org. And they have a floor plan where you can go into any room and get a 360-degree view. So I had it as like a bookmark on my computer where I could just go into the library, look around. All right, what's that painting above the fireplace? Right, there it is. So it was as if I was there.
Yeah.
And that helps so much. And on top of that, they have a great digital archive that I was able to get into, where they would have things like, the payroll from the 1919s when they had all these people on staff and what they were paid and what they did. Or they would have photos of the old rooms before they were turned over into offices, which helped. And they even had things like a dinner menu from 1915, a list of all the guests, what the menu was. And so that was just tremendous. And I have to say the archivists there are fantastic. And that was really, really helpful.
So are they so excited about this book? Like, what is the reaction at the Frick been?
They have been wonderful. Now, keep in mind, the Frick is under renovation at the moment. I feel like any building I pick just shuts down. Like there's something that I do because the Chelsea Hotel's under renovation. The New York Public Library I picked, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And the Frick is under renovation this year, but they've moved most of the art collection to the Frick Madison, which is within walking distance. And I highly recommend it. You can see all the paintings. You can walk around the mansion and take a look at it from the outside, but it's not open just yet. But anyway, they've been just wonderful. And it's been such a help to be able to bounce things off them. And, okay, what color is this? How would you describe this? And they've just been really, really terrific. It's been great. I have to say, I think the one thing during lockdown that was really tough as a writer was that you kind of walking out on the streets and seeing someone and thinking, oh, that's what the character should look like.
Right.
Or working on a plot point and the answer comes to you in the subway, or going to a play and hearing dialogue and thinking, oh, right, this is what I'm doing wrong. I should do this instead. And so that serendipity I really missed. And the city is definitely coming back. Things are good. We had a book launch on Tuesday and it was in person and it was just phenomenal. And so I feel like, okay, we're bubbling back and fingers crossed.
Exactly. I think that's everyone's sentiment at this point. Like fingers crossed. We're just taking it a day at a time, seeing how we're doing. But I certainly miss having you here in person. But it's lovely to talk with you this way. And next book for sure.
I am there. Yep. You know it.
Okay. I am going to open it up to questions because so many of them overlap mine. So Chris was wondering, was this the original title of your book?
I'm so bad at titles and I haven't named any of the books. It's always been my agent or my editor who figured it out because you need a title that refers not only to the building, but also the plot without being too on the nose. Mm-hmm. You don't want it to be the library or the family that lives in the library. And I'm just awful at it. But this one I came up with because it was really tricky. The Frick, it's not like it's so well known that it has other names. Mm-hmm. And I remember as I was trying to figure it out, seeing a photo of the magnolia trees. There's 3 of them outside and they're just stunning. And they are kind of indicative of the Frick. That's, they were planted there on purpose. They represent transients, which is almost like the residence becoming a museum. Yeah. They're stunning. And so I thought, what if we call it the Magnolia Palace? And then in the plot, I already had a stolen diamond. And so I made it a stolen pink diamond and called it the Magnolia Diamond as a way to kind of pull them all together. And that is fictional. It's made up. And anything that I do is very clearly marked in the author's note as to what's fact and what's fiction, because there is such a blend in this book, more than my other books.
So my question, not taking it from there, where do you find your character names?
Oh, that's fun. I love doing that. What I normally do is I figure out what year they were born and I do a Google search for the popular names of, 1880 or 1890. And then you get a list of 100. And it's so much fun because they're very different from the names that we often have today. And so I think there's a Bertha, I try and find ones for the minor characters that there's an Archer that are a little unusual. So it just takes you back in time a little more. And you really feel like, okay, there's no Skylers in 1919. And so you don't want to do that because it just takes the reader out of it. I want it to be as true as possible to the time period.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is your favorite part of the writing process? The research, writing, or edits? And then a follow-up from the same person. How do you know when to leave the research and get to writing?
These are such good questions. Yeah. My favorite part is editing. I hate the first draft. To me, that is just brutal. It's like pulling teeth trying to create a scene when there was nothing there beforehand. And I use my plot and my outline, but just to have a scene, I often write a scene and everybody's nodding their heads because that's, the best I can do at that moment. And then I go in and I revise. And so one might nod their head and one might, shake their foot. And so you try and, shake it up a little bit. And in terms of research, what I do is I start following rabbit holes. So, and I keep a list of everything that I need to research. So the list for the Magnolia Palace had things like Frick biographies, which were fascinating. Find a book on how to be a private secretary that was published in the early 1900s. Find out about Audrey Munson. And there's a wonderful book called Curse of Beauty that's her biography that highly recommend. It's a great read. And then at a certain point, I start getting those scene ideas and character ideas. And there's just a point, it's like a tipping point where I know it's time to start focusing on the plot and the characters and move away from the research. It's like I've exhausted all of the avenues that I want to do, and it's just time to get started. And it's just kind of this internal tipping point, but it's hard because research is fun. It's great to go out and talk to architectural historians and these experts in something that I know nothing about and take in as much information as I can. I'm like a sponge.
So another question with regards to the writing process, do you write the two timelines at the same time or do you write them separately and then piece them together?
I tend to write the older one first. It tends to be longer. So that makes up the bulk of the book. I think it's about 60% and 40% in this one. And so I do the older one first and do that all the way through. And then I do the modern one and do that all the way through and then weave them together. And it's a long process because you have to read the book with them woven together. And then once it's at a certain point and pretty well revised and edited, you have to take them apart and read them again because you have to make sure things are consistent. And that's the toughest part, is keeping that consistency.
Yeah, I can't imagine that it's easy, but you do. I mean, number one, you've got a lot of practice at this point, but you do it so well. And it's also a skill. I will say that every time I finish a chapter in one timeline, I'm sad to go to the next timeline because I'm like into that, and then it happens with the next chapter. Oh, I have to go back again. Like it only takes a few paragraphs and you're in the next one. But it's an amazing thing that you can make us not want to leave to go to the other timeline.
That's great. That's great. And it's tricky because, you don't want people to be like, oh no, we're in the 60s again. You want to make it as interesting as the other one. And that's the tough part.
Yeah. Are there any secret rooms in this book like your last book?
Ooh, I don't think there are any there are secret hiding places, definitely, in this book. And there's a lot of secrets within the family. And so secrets are a huge part of this book, actually, but not secret rooms. It's more like secret hiding places where things can be tucked away.
Okay. I think you've already alluded to this, especially with the two timelines, but do you read genres like yours or different genres altogether?
I do a mix. I love historical fiction, and there's so much coming out. Like Beautiful Little Fools by Gillian Cantor comes out next week and is wonderful. There's so many great books. A Christie Affair. It's just, there's so much going on. So I love it. And I've met so many great historical fiction authors who are now friends. So you always want to read their books and find out what they're doing. But I also love mysteries. I think that like something like The Maid by Nita Prose is really fun, because how is she going to pull this off? How is she going to redirect our attention so we can't figure out what the truth is, and when do you reveal it? So that I enjoy as well. So it's a bit of a mix.
Excellent. Have you met any of the Frick family, or have any of the family reached out to you about the book?
I have not heard from anyone in the Frick family. And as I mentioned, there is one Frick descendant who wrote 2 biographies, one on Henry Frick and one on Helen. And they are terrific and were a great resource for me. I have not heard from her, but the Frick, the staff at the Frick have been really great at letting the board know what's going on. And so they've all read the book, and that's really, really nice. It feels like we got the seal of approval, which is that is something that you definitely want, because you want to do it justice, and you want to make these characters 3-dimensional. And so they're not always sympathetic, but they're vulnerable. And I think that's the key.
So do you think that once the museum reopens, you'll be able to do some kind of event there for Magnolia Palace?
Yeah. Oh, I think that'd be fun. Or even something at the Frick Madison now would be fun. I know everybody's talking behind the scenes. So we'll see what comes from it. Because I think that would be great. To just be paired up with a curator and go and look at some of the works of art that are mentioned in the book. As I mentioned, it's that scavenger hunt. And so I've picked certain artworks that, that's where they find the clues. And for me, I wanted to include all this beautiful art, but without making it like a art history lesson.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to hit people over the head with it. And so a scavenger hunt that's led by clues that are really bad poetry was the way I decided to do it. And it was so much fun to write bad poetry, by the way. I'm really good at it, I realized.
Oh gosh, your talents are limitless. Okay, so there's a word in here. I know that you've talked about your characters and researching them, but this question is, did you find anything out in your research that shocked you about your characters?
Oh, I think it was really in the learning about Audrey Munson that shocked me. That someone who could have been so famous, I mean, she was like the Madonna of her time, could just be forgotten and lost and die in such a sad way. And so to me, that was the biggest surprise. And that's what I wanted to do in the book, of maybe give her a different ending.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have a logistical question about the historical short story collection.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be available as a book or only an ebook?
I believe it's ebook and audiobook.
Okay.
That's the way they do it.
They've been doing some pretty cool audio originals. So
yeah. But again, I'll know more info soon, and I'm really excited. I can't wait to find out who the other historical fiction authors who were asked to write are. I don't know yet. So.
Well, I can't wait for that Carnegie Hall story. It sounds amazing. Just a little bit of endearing news. There is someone on here, Heidi, who says she's a Frick staffer and watching, and they're thrilled. So
oh, that's wonderful. Heidi was my main contact when I showed up, and she answered all my questions, and she was just a huge help. So yeah, I'm so glad she's here. That's great.
Do you think you will write about a building outside of New York?
I think that would be fun. I would love to go to London and do something like the Globe Theater, or, something like that, where you're really stepping back in time. I love stories that are set in old creaky manor houses in England.
I'm in.
Yeah, right. Right. And so, in fact, Lauren Belford, the author, has a wonderful book coming out that's set in a creaky old manor with secret rooms. So that's coming out soon. And so, yeah, I think I'd love to go to England and do it. And then I could just write off a trip to England, right?
Absolutely. Sounds like a win for readers, all of us, for sure. What would you tell someone who is considering writing a novel?
Oh, I would say to read a lot in whatever genre you want. So you really get to know who the other authors are, and follow them on social media and engage with them, because it really is a community. And so once you're kind of in that group, you can really see how people are managing, and, what are they doing now, and how do you handle this kind of thing? And then on top of that, I'd say not to feel any pressure, because I didn't start writing a book until I was in my late 40s. And, everything worked out fine. I feel like you don't need to write the great American novel by the time you're 30. I think for me, I had nothing to say when I was in my 20s. I was a complete blithering idiot. And so, being able to wait and have life experiences that you can incorporate into your characters or into your writing, to me, that's worth the wait. And, I also took just lots of writing classes. There's Gotham Writers Workshop was where I just signed up and did an online workshop of, all right, how do you write a short story? And not being afraid to write badly, because that's the only way you learn.
Yeah. Let's see. We have more questions. All right. So this is a question I always like to end on. I feel like there was one other I wanted to get to before that one. Let's see.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. It's fantastic. I'm absolutely thrilled.
Yeah. Do you think that you would ever write in a totally different genre?
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Gosh, it'd be fun to write a thriller. I think that would be interesting, but I'd be pretty intimidated. I think I love all the support that historical fiction gives you in terms of the time period. And I love the research.
Yeah.
And I love creating this scaffold of a story on things that really happened. So I think I'm probably locked in with historical fiction. Although, I'll take any suggestions. If there's a good sci-fi story you want told, maybe I'll try that.
I'm not going to have you change. If it's not broke, why fix it? So right. I'm good with you sticking with what you're doing. So I will comment. There are several people who've mentioned, their books are on the way. As I mentioned earlier, if you missed the first 30 seconds of intro, you missed this. We have shipped out all the personalized and signed copies that were pre-ordered. They are winging their way to you across the country. I see a few of you have already gotten them. So just be patient. They are on the way for sure. And we do still have signed copies available in stock. There's a link in the comments if you'd like to order. We did just have one question pop up really quickly. I'll get to it and then I'll do the last question. Would you ever co-write with a thriller author?
Oh, that sounds like a thriller author out there. Yeah, there are some wonderful thriller authors out there who write together, and it's really incredible. E.G. Scott, and I'm biased there because I know one of them quite well, but E.G. Scott is a great thriller pairing. And Teresa Sorkin and Tulun have written some great books, and they have another one coming out very soon. And Liz and Lisa, there's just some really, really great pairs out there. And I love the idea of being able to bounce things off someone else. I think that would be so freeing, because when you're writing alone, you are just in your own head, and it's up to you, if you've dug yourself into a hole, to dig yourself out. And so having someone else, I think, would be a lot of fun. I think it'd be great.
Okay, the last question I'm going to do is from one of our regular viewers. She always has this question, and I love it. And I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but what writers, living or dead, would you like to have dinner with?
Oh, that's a good one. I would love to have dinner with Ann Patchett, because she just seems like one of the nicest people in the world. And she's such a supporter of course, indie bookstores and authors. And I loved her recent memoir. I'd love to meet Shakespeare, just to see exactly who he was, or was he a she, which is a very kind of a radical viewpoint, which I think I might agree with. And that would be
I'm
fun.
Totally into this Shakespeare authorship debate, like any books about that. So yeah, he would definitely be on my list. Just to be like, who are you and what's actually happening?
Yeah. How did you do it? How did you do this?
And where'd you go for a little while?
and exactly. And I loved Hamnet, like any kind of retelling of his life or of his plays. When I was in high school, I had an English teacher, and he taught us to love Shakespeare. So I'm really indebted to him, because I think that gives you such a great grounding for plot and character in such a huge way. But I have one more to go, don't I?
Yeah, sure. Well, there was no
Yeah.
required number, but if you have one more, go for it.
Nella Larson, who wrote Passing, which
Yeah.
I read a couple years ago and just loved, and it's now been made into a movie.
Yeah.
She's another one who's kind of resurfaced after being maybe forgotten for a long time. So I'd love to hear what the Harlem Renaissance was like in the 1920s. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Fiona, as always, this has been delightful. I love chatting with you. I love your books. I love what you do. I love the landmarks, all the things. So I'm happy to have gotten this chance to chat. Like I said, hopefully next year it'll be in person. I can't wait to read anything you write. And yeah, thank you. And thank you for doing all those personalizations for us. It's great, and I'm sure people are excited to get their books.
Well, thank you, McKenna, for having me. I swear, your bookstore was one of the first ones that found my debut and said, "Hey, people should read this." And that kind of word of mouth that indie bookstores and indie booksellers do, that's what makes a career. And so I really owe you guys big time, because I remember seeing that tweet and thinking, "Oh my goodness, someone's read my book," and just the way you led the way is just terrific, and I'm very, very grateful.
It is the single best part of the job, finding debut authors that we want to love and support. So it's truly my pleasure. And here we are years later, still chatting about your books, and you just having a great turnout of people who love everything you write. So it's wonderful. Stay safe. I'm going to log us off for the night. Thank you all for watching. It's been a very busy chat, lots of questions, lots of comments, and that makes it an extra fun evening for us. So thanks for watching, Fiona. Safe travels back home. Get out of that hotel room with the fish, and hopefully we'll chat soon.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.